everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again for another one of our Women Talk Hollywood um, uh, series. I am so excited today to host Native women who are talking Hollywood. And this is going to be hosted, moderated by the beautiful, always loud and proud, always speaking up, and talented Lorna Silva. Here she is.
Thank you, Mirage, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you, everybody who's tuning in on Facebook and YouTube. And before we get started, I would like to start with something which is a tradition for me now in everything that I host and everywhere I go. It is important that I do this. And I'd like to take a moment to pay my respect to all elders, present and past, and to pay all my respect to Native people, Native American, First Nations, and Aboriginal here in the United States and all over the world. And I especially want to give my respect to the Native people, the Tongva people, who were the original keepers and stewards of the land here in Southern California, where Native Women Talk Hollywood originates. And I extend that same respect and honor to the elders, and especially the elders for all of our guests. So thank you for this. And I invite you for you to do this and to see who were the elders and the original keepers of the land that you are on. And also, I'd like to take a moment to say that this is happening, this movement is happening thanks to the Black Lives Matter movement. Black Lives Matter. And this is a moment to take a stand and be anti-racist. And we cannot talk about being anti-racist if we do not talk about the issues that face the Native American people here in the United States and all over the world. So having said that, now I'd like to start bringing our guests one by one. So first, I'd like to invite to join me Adrienne Chalipa. Hope I said it right. And she's an actress, comedian, and writer. And she's joining us, and she's also a published author. Here you are. Great. Thank you, Adrienne.
Thank you for having me. I'm Adrienne Chalipa. I'm Kiowa Apache. I'm from Oklahoma. And I'm just happy to be here. Thank you, guys.
Yay, thank you. Thank you for being here. Now I'd like to invite Kara Jade Myers, actor, writer, producer, director, dog mom, houseplant collector.
Hi, everyone. Kara Jade Myers. I am also Kiowa. My family's out, my dad's side out in Oklahoma, but I'm Kiowa, Wichita, all from Oklahoma. I'm currently living in Los Angeles, and I am so excited to be here. And thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, good friend, soul sister, super talented Carolina Hoyos, an actress, filmmaker, singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist. Carolina, welcome.
Hi, Sutirimana, Solpaki, Carolina. Hi, I thank you so much for having me. I'm Carolina Hoyos. I'm here in Los Angeles. Oh, I'm Peruvian Quechua and Ecuadorian Quechua, and I am currently in Los Angeles on Tataviam, Chumash, and Tongvaland. Thank you for having me. So good to see you.
Thank you. And next, I'd like to invite Jackie Kelly.
Hello. Hi, Lorna. Thank you for the pronunciation, beautiful pronunciation of my last name. Yes, everyone. Hi, I'm Jackie. I'm actually in Oakland, California. Right now, I'm actually born and raised in the East Bay. I'm Yerington Paiute, and I'm Washoe, and I'm Native Hawaiian, and so excited to be here with you all today.
Great. Thank you. And a great stand-up comic, by the way. I forgot to mention that. And last but not least, Shelley Dennis, actress, writer, comedian, and showrunner in the making.
Thank you. Shelley Dennis, so honored to be a part of this. I'm in the Native American showrunner program this year. I am from the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, now living in Los Angeles, and ready to party.
Yes. So let's get this party started. So let's see. I'm waiting for everybody, waiting for all the little screens to show up so I can see all your beautiful faces. So thank you for being here. Thank you for saying yes to this panel. So I would like to hear a little bit more about what you do, because I think so. We have several things in common, and we have several comedians and performers. I mean, actually, all of us. So I would like to hear, how did you get started? In your careers, and when did you know, hey, I want to do? So whoever wants to take that first.
Nice, I can go. Oh, go ahead, Carolina, go.
I was just gonna tell everybody what a brat I am. Basically, my brother, I started out as a pianist, and my brother, it was originally that my parents were putting my brother in classes, and so they had a piano for him, and I was 2 years old, and I was like, I'm on the piano now. And so I did that for like a year, and finally, I don't know if I was horrible. It must have been, because they were like, we have to put her in lessons. This is just terrible. This is giving us a headache. So that's how I got started. It was, I consider music my first language. It's more like an instinct making sounds. So I'm a brat.
All right, Kara.
Yeah, I grew up in a household that wasn't very, like, I guess I was more in survival mode growing up, and I always saw like TV as an escape and stuff like that, but I never thought I could do it. Mm-hmm. And then when I was about 22, I was already married at that time, and I was like, man, I wish I could do acting. And my husband's like, then do it. Like, you don't just go and do acting. You can't just do it. And he's like, well, why don't you at least take a class? And I'm like, okay, that sounds smart. I mean, like, I can do a class. And so then that's how that started, was, forever ago. And then once I got to Hollywood about 10 years ago, I started reading scripts that were very not good, I guess. Like, I would get auditions for that I still remember would literally say, you are just a prop to the male. Like, and I'm like, this is, yeah. I would get scripts like that, or they're like, oh, please be naked. And you're like, no. So it's like, I started writing for myself of like, I want to write strong women. And then, it just kind of kept going and going and going. And so.
Great.
That's a good husband, Kara. Feel like you should do this. I had this I grew up in Clayton, Oklahoma, which is a town of about 700 people. I think we hit 1,000 recently. So it was very small. There was nothing to do. So I just had this overactive imagination and was trying to entertain other people, but really myself. And part of that was like, I would play all the roles. So while I got into acting originally, I think it was probably a few years into it where I was frustrated at how I was always like girlfriend number one, girlfriend number two. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I wrote a part for myself in a sketch show where I was this really grotesque Russian woman with a unibrow and a mole, and no one would ever cast me in that. And I was like, oh, so I can write any character, and I can write these characters for other people. So it was almost like I finally got in the driver's seat when I allowed myself to write other characters. And I'm like just as excited to see other people play them as I am for myself.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've seen that sketch. When I was like, oh, that's brilliant.
Thank you.
Great.
All right, Adrian. It's between me and you, Adrian. Both of us. We're having a polite off. We're like, who goes first? Go ahead, Adrian.
So I went to public school in Oklahoma, and in 9th grade, I got suspended for heckling my teachers. I was full of teenage angst, and I was really kind of an activist, but I like to do it by talking crap, and that was not appreciated at the time by anybody around me. I really isolated myself. My family didn't like me either. So I went to boarding school because I couldn't go to public school, and got in trouble some more. But then when I finally came out of getting in trouble, I went to college, and it was at Fort Lewis in Durango, Colorado. And I did an open mic night, and started doing stand-up, and I just fell in love with it. I felt like there was no way I was going to take the path that I originally was trying to do, which was journalism. It was the opposite. And so then I did that for 10 years, and then I found myself getting into screenwriting because of the same reasons that you guys are talking about. Is just like there's nothing out there that would ever come close to representing me, and not just me, but even my community. I think I was really inspired when I went to boarding school, because I met all these kids from all over the United States and Alaska, and I felt like I never saw them, and their stories were never told, and they just have to be told. But I also want to do it in a comical way, because I'm one of those people that can't be serious for very long. So that's where I'm at.
Great. Thank you.
So I got started in stand-up. I mean, I was always like the ham in my family. Like at family parties, they'd be like, Jackie, go do this thing. So I was always very playful. I loved watching SNL. Like I just loved Chris Farley. Anything he did was just amazing to me. And so, but I was always sort of on the track of being a professional and like going to college and then going to grad school and all that kind of stuff. And then stand-up, I had been watching the local scene in San Francisco and kind of paying attention to it for like a year or two. Like, oh, I like comedy, but I would never do it. Like doing that whole like voyeur thing. And there was a ladies open mic night in 2011 is when I did my first ever open mic. And I did okay. I didn't fall flat on my face, and I was like, ooh, this is fun, so that's how it got started, and I've been doing it for years now, and I really couldn't imagine any other thing. I still do have like a day job, and I'm still like a working professional and stuff, but like there is a point that I want to get to where I break off and focus 100% of the time. And that's to Adrian's point, that's why I want to start doing more writing and kind of getting into screenwriting and finding funny roles and seeing more funny Native women on TV, so it's been a good time because there's a lot of big wins lately in Native screenwriting and exactly. So anyway, that's how I got started.
Yay. So if we notice here, like even if we come from different parts, we notice the same thing. It's like, oh, there's nothing out there written that reflects me, that reflects who I am, that reflects where I grew up, the people that I know, my community. So here you all are making something happen, writing your own materials, writing some of your own shows coming up and stand up. And, I am curious, about what are some of the challenges that you face now that once you were like, nah, I ain't taking my clothes off. I am not going to be just a prop to the male. So what are some of the challenges that you have encountered as you're trying to find, not trying, but writing with your own voice?
Well, for casting, I know this is a bad issue. There's so many pretendians that make it through and claim us, but we don't claim them. And they're their supposed clans don't claim them. And it just really sets us back. And they start to gain steam and they have a platform. And sometimes, I call it, they convert and they start to care about Native issues and voice Native issues. But it's just in the long run, it's not helping us. And casting isn't taking it seriously to find authentic Natives. So it's been a struggle. I've actually, anytime I do attend a Q&A with casting people, I'm like, what are you doing to make sure you're casting authentically? Because everybody thinks they know Native, but they don't. And, it's a tricky situation with blood quantum, which, is a white colonizer construct. And I don't want that to be the case. Someone could have it culturally in them and carry it for generations and maybe not present as Native, but they're more culturally Native than somebody who didn't grow up in the culture. Anyway, that's probably a longer conversation, but that's one of the main reasons we're all creating as well. If we can take control of our stories and actually produce our own projects, and like Shelley's going to be the showrunner of tomorrow, then we can get our own things on the air and take more control and not wait for the gatekeepers. We create our own gates. Screw them.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very much been like that. It's like when casting, and also they're not like real people. They're like, oh, your leathers and feathers is what I call it. Like that's
Stoic.
been, yeah, stoic. It's been like 90% of all the roles, and like lately it's getting better, but it's still like they're like, oh, you're Native American, let's add some mythical element to it. And I'm like, okay, I'm not a wizard. Like I just,
Right.
I'm just Native,
You gotta dance, you gotta chant, you gotta do all those things.
Gotta be a medicine man, like coming out of a teepee. And I'm like, no, I live in a house. Like I have a car. Like it's fine.
We have running water.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's just, I think it's creating the opportunity to have like people see us. Like that's why I love writing, is because like every character I write, I'm technically writing them as a Native character, even though I don't put them as Native, and I just write them as normal people, and I'm like, please just like write us more normal people. We're people, I promise.
That is exactly right. We're people. Yes, Jackie.
Yeah, to that point, I think in stand-up too, that's been a challenge that I've come across, and I think I've only started recognizing it more recently in my work. But when it comes to writing, because I do perform for sort of mainstream audiences in San Francisco that wouldn't necessarily get some of the Indian humor that I do for Native shows. So I do find that I have to sort of balance the material of depending on the audience. And I've definitely, luckily, been able to, in the Bay Area, we have a pretty robust Native community here. So I've been able to perform for Native audiences, which I love, but I'm working sort of a different muscle when I'm doing that versus when I'm doing a stage at a venue in San Francisco, with a non-Native audience. But I think there are some expectations for me on stage and sort of who I am and what I'm presenting myself as, and sort of what, I've definitely had people react to my comedy in different ways because, are there Indians in the Bay Area? Yeah. And so I think that in itself is something I've thought of recently. And I bet Adrian has some thoughts about it too, about like, how do you balance the material you're working? And there's certain topics that that are my lived experience, but I won't share them on stage because I'm concerned that the folks in the audience may or may not know Native people and might go, oh, then that's what I'm going to remember all of them by, So it's a delicate. I think sometimes I'm probably more thoughtful, probably that I need to be about like what I'll talk about on stage versus not, because I just don't want anyone to walk away and go, oh, okay, all Indians do this and think this way.
Yeah. I agree with all of that because I think when I started doing stand up, I joined a pre-established group, which was 49 Laughs Comedy, and it was James Jones and Ernest David Sosi, Tonka Means, and Pax Harvey, who all at the time had their own thing going on, and they all connected, and they already had a fan base. So I just kind of slid in there and was like, here I am. And but it was mostly on the res or near the res or at a tribal casino or at a tribal conference or something like that. And I was really lucky that there was just so few women that I always felt like it was mostly like, wow, there's a woman on stage. And I felt like my novelty sort of alone. I mean, not to knock my talent, but I'm just gonna be honest. In the beginning days, I was not that funny. I was mostly on stage like, cool, but it just kind of started taking off on its own because people want to see, especially Indigenous women, they want to see themselves portrayed in a funny light because we are funny. Like none of us have these sad characters that they show on TV. Really, in our life, we don't know those women, or like the overly victimized Indigenous woman. Not in my family. Like I mean, not saying they aren't victims. Of course, they've been through a lot, but I'm just saying, like I think people really, really wanted to hear women talk crap and be funny. And so I had a lot of support, and I was really lucky. Then when I started trying to perform for non-Native audiences and kind of break off and be solo, I realized that I struggled definitely transferring my material. And to the point where I was like, okay, I realized that I didn't even know non-native people. I lived in a bubble my entire life.
Wow.
And so I think that's, for me, in breaking into the entertainment industry, one of the main struggles is literally just making the connections outside of Indian country, because I love my people and I'm comfortable there. And it doesn't mean that I, don't love anybody else. It's just I got comfortable and I'm like, I almost want to stick my feet in the water and test it out. And I don't know. I kind of watched other people. I'm a observant person, so I watched other people go through Hollywood and see how it treated them, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want that. So for the longest time, I kind of been on the outskirts and said, I'm just gonna sit here and make fun of you guys, and we'll do that. But that hasn't worked either. So I started transitioning into acting, and that's a whole nother.
Yeah, no, that's a whole other thing. But here is the interesting thing: like what you're experiencing, like so many is, there is like this image that exists, of how indigenous, native should be, and like I was saying, the stoic, and especially the women. The problem of violence against Native women is real, without a doubt. At the same time, there is so much more to Native women than that story, and that's a story that needs to be told, that people need to know about. But we're not that, we're not just like the downtrodden victim and kind of us being funny and outspoken. It's like, no, that's not Native. And, and I also one of the things I want to highlight is like, notice the diversity in experiences in the Native experience. It's like from, and one of the reasons I wanted you, Jackie, it's like, there are natives in California, like there are urban natives in California. Like, yes, there are.
Yeah, I to that point, I'm sure some of you know there's a book There written by Tommy Orange that came out. Was it last year or the year before? And it blew up. People were like, "Oh my God, there's Indians in the urban areas." And like for me, I was reading that book. I was like, "Yeah, like yes, we're here," and it was just so validating. And I love it because they're gonna. I think I want to say it's going to be turned into a mini series. I might be wrong, but anyway, I'm like, yes, please. Like I am urban Indian. My grandparents both met at Stewart Indian School in Carson City, Nevada. So that's where all the Washos, the Paiutes, and the Shoshones basically stayed. And so that's why there's so many Washo, Paiute, Shoshones out there. And we grew up out here. So my grandpa ran like Indian sports leagues back during the urban Indian relocation era. So like all that time, my family was all part of that sort of space making here in the Bay. And so I just loved finally having some mainstream piece of work sort of validate our experience. And so even in Native comedy, some of the stuff that I joke about, it's a little bit more urban, you know what I mean? And so I would, Adrian performs at different reses and stuff. I've actually never performed at a res, and I'm like nervous. Like, I feel like that would be my hardest audience. I'd be like, oh, I don't want the aunties to hate me. You know what I mean? Like, I want to make, that would be a challenge for me, but I also want to bring it to a stage at some point, in my career to be able to do that. And that would be awesome. That'd be fun because the Native people I know are the funniest people. Like, we can find humor in anything. And that's how I got started, was like my family just going back and forth at each other and trying to one up, and the teasing. Oh my God. So it's just naturally part of who we are. And so it's definitely, I want to spotlight that. We're so funny.
Yes. Oh, for sure. And for our audience, we can see your comments on YouTube. If you're commenting on Facebook Live, it might take a little bit because we got to get into our devices, but we can definitely see the questions that are coming through YouTube. And there was a comment earlier saying, convincing that there is a market. I would love to hear, Shelly, a little bit about your experience, because I know that you toured, with Wayne Brady, and you've also done stand-up. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience and your perspective.
I had so many thoughts as I was listening to everyone.
No, anything you want to share.
Oh, no. I'm just like, where do I start? I love that so I have to be more conscious of how I'm perceived, because stand-up is all about, like when you walk on that stage, you have to address certain things. and you have to, before, so they're not left wondering. So I didn't have a native brand and that's what's interesting is, as a writer, I'm getting these opportunities. People are wanting a native consult or something for their projects, and they'll reach out, and then we get on a Zoom and they'll look at me and say, how native are you? or something to that degree. And I'm just, my heart sinks. But, there are some people who do want an authentic urban, or whatever your experience is. And I say, look, if you want someone who has dealt with, being put in a stereotype because of how I look, I'm not your person. If you want someone who's grown up on a reservation, I'm not your person. Here's my experience and how I just, was like part of this community and forgot I was like the white, the light, like, the light skinned kid in the group. But so it's interesting. I feel like I don't have my voice isn't best heard in I know what it's like to feel that judgment. What I can do as a writer is create characters who do, because that's my mom's side of the family. So that was also frustrating as an actress, where it's like, oh, they're casting Choctaw natives. I'm like, that's me. And then, my agent's like, we don't, so I couldn't, be who I felt I was fully, and I'm not the perfect representation of that. So I have to be just cognizant and sensitive about that. But yeah, I love in stand-up there, we are all from, generations and generations of storytellers. So it's so crazy that we don't have more stories. Whether it's in the comedy, because comedy, oh my gosh, some of my funniest family members and characters that I draw from for my scripts are from that side of the family, because it's just, it's sassy and it's smart, or at least from, what I knew of. And I'm so excited to meet two stand-ups today that are like embracing that and being a representation of that. And unfortunately, yeah, you're representing everyone to a lot of people, but it's a start. So it's just, I think, knowing what our role is and embracing it as best we can.
Great. Thank you. And I think you touched on something really important, and it is the pressure of being like the first, like Adrian, you're saying like you were the novelty, but it's great. Like there is a woman, but then it's like, oh, wow. So there is this one native, you're being seen as the one native, stand-up comic performer. And now it's like, suddenly you're representing an entire group of people, and it is such a diverse group of people by definition. So it is a lot of pressure. So, and it's like, this is the idea of having panels like this for everybody to see. It's like, the native experience is really broad, and native people look in many different ways. And we just look at this panel and we can see it already. And there is a very good question. Sometimes you see me looking down as I'm taking notes, because there's some good questions that are coming on the YouTube chat. And I think this is the great moment for these questions. There was a question about how prevalent are native writers in Hollywood? Like, how many native writers are there in Hollywood that we know?
A handful?
Yeah, not
2
many.
handfuls?
Wasn't the GA statistic like 12 or something? Like, your members? Yeah.
And that's WGA, that's union. There's plenty of us that are working towards that. But yeah, the ones that have been hired and qualify for union, it's like 12. We got a show coming on Peacock, right?
Yeah.
Fully native staff.
Yeah.
Yes.
And one of the problems
so
with like Native American writers is like they do want you to like you said, represent an entire thing. Like, I'm Kiowa in Wichita, yet like if I get hired on a show about Choctaws, they're like, tell me about Choctaws. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm sorry, It's like there's 757, I think, like registered tribes in the United States. And each of those tribes are unique and individual. So it's like you can't represent everyone, and you can't be accurate on everyone,
Yeah. And I think another challenge is location, just simple as location, because I was told one time by Louis Anderson, shout out if you're out there. But this is the part where we start dropping names. Just kidding. Okay. But one time he said, your biggest obstacle is your geographics, because I refuse to move to Hollywood or New York City or any of the comedy hubs. And I live in Albuquerque, and that was a big move for me. I was like, that was the big city for me. And it was a good step in the right direction. But I think with Native people, especially if you live on the res or near the res, you're geographically isolated from the cities, and it creates an entire different world. And there's a lot that I didn't know that I'm learning, and just learning about, I feel like half of it is just learning about the entertainment industry, like just learning what's what. Yeah. And that stuff's not taught. It's not offered. It's not, there's no mentorships that I know of, at least like on reservations or near reservations. And so a lot of people, if you're not a city native, you get left out completely. And I think that's changing. And I'm really hopeful for, especially in these times, because we're doing all this virtually. A lot of talent is coming out of the woodworks because they're not limited by their location. And I think we're going to see a lot more talent just popping up because of the world that we now live in. Because for the longest time, I just didn't feel like it was really worth it pursuing a serious acting career because I didn't live in LA. And I think things are changing.
Yeah, no, things are. And, there's, if you don't mind me saying, the thing is, you have a family too, Adrienne.
Yeah.
Your mother. So.
It's.
Wow.
So right. So there is an added challenge, if we look for women, the fact that many women do want to have families, and it's like, and if you live somewhere that's not LA and you want to break through and you have stories to tell and you know that you're good at it, and all of this stuff, it's kind of hidden. So how do you break into, but that, one of the things that we are getting out of this pandemic, it's the ability to connect. And I think somebody that we all have in common is Joey Clift. I think it's through him that so hi, Joey.
I think he's watching, yeah.
I'm sure. And if he's not, we'll have a talk. But one of the things, he said, like, he was talking to somebody in another state that I forget, a young man that wants to be a screenwriter. So he was able to have, kind of like a Zoom coffee to talk to him about. So these opportunities are starting to open up. And there was a question that came up on the chat that I want to get to. But, now that we're talking about writer, some of you have done writing fellowships, like there is the LA Skins Lab. There's some of these programs. I would love for you to share a little bit about that experience, and if you feel that that's an avenue that's opening something up for you. Past or present.
Shelly's done 2 of them.
Yes.
Or you're in one right now.
But we are.
Enough. Yeah. Carolina and Kara and I all did the TV Writers Lab last spring, summer, and it totally, I mean, the resources that we were provided with was, I was blown away. And the community that we were, because, we were all back before the pandemic, we were all in a room together for 5 weeks, working on our own scripts. And then you see everyone else's process and you become invested. You see how hard everybody's working. You become invested in your fellows, and that has continued on. They're like, it's just a really wonderful community. But doors are opening, I think, for all of us, and just because we had them open for us. And the LA Skins program, Ian and Patty have bent over backwards. I'm in awe of all that they're able to do. And there's something driving them. I've never pulled them aside and been like, how do you stay? They're just like relentless. Constant. And following up with people, dozens and dozens of times who aren't answering the first time. They're doing that on our behalf because they know how important it is and how that's really where it starts. And the great thing is that they're educating us. They're not just saying, oh, here, let's try to get them a job really fast. They're like, here is an expert that's going to walk you guys through this process, and they're introducing us to many different resources so that our craft can get better. Because the worst thing you want to do is get a token, anything, put them in a room or a position that they're not ready to be in, and then that opportunity is gone and you've done more harm than good. So they're also taking time to educate us and make sure that we're ready for those opportunities, which I think is just the way to go.
And they also have programs that go to different reses and different states around the U.S. I don't know that I think it's all U.S. But they teach kids filmmaking. They used to do a comedy thing, a sketch comedy thing here, and a stand-up comedy thing. But I think they've been so consumed with all the writer labs and now the showrunner lab. They're really trying to take over. Well, at least have us have more representation, accurate representation in the media. So, but yeah, they're great. They're really great. And so Sundance also does stuff in different states. Documentary and narrative, but mostly filmmaking.
Yeah, Skinsfest has really helped me out. It's from them. I got my manager. I was able to, through them, I learned so much. It was amazing that I started at the beginning of this year through A3 had a program as well that I did, and where I wrote a pilot, and because they were looking for very much diversity, and that's what I love is people are looking for diversity. They're actually seeking out Native American voices. So it was awesome going to a different company that wasn't Native but also looking for natives, so that was amazing. And then now I'm starting on Monday the feature film lab with Skins Lab. So I'm really excited about that, and it's going to be brutal because we're supposed to write a full feature in 10 weeks, and I'm like, whew. But yeah, Patty and Ian have been absolutely amazing, and they've introduced us into we got to meet the executive producer for Kung Fu Monkey. Like, there's no way we would have been able to get through that door just on our own, So it's amazing, and it's just, the opportunities have been great, and so I love these. I kind of hate that, like, it's specifically Native American. Like, I have to, like, that's the only way I felt like I could get in is through an Native American thing. But I love having that opportunity, because it's like, I feel like there's no other way that maybe I would have gotten overlooked for sure as like just an Indigenous woman. Who's still learning. I felt like I very much would have gotten overlooked. So I love that it's Native American, and I'm so excited. And I'm hoping that by writing these stories, because like I said, I don't try to skew Native, but of course my last pilot was Native. But it's just, I love that I can write these stories and then bring in Native people, because like networking, doing stuff like this, where like Adrienne said, she's not living in LA, but I can be like, I know a funny girl, so I'm like, I can, she doesn't have to live in LA, because the Zoom has been great in networking,
Yeah. Even for casting now, you can be anywhere, especially with the pandemic shutdown. I mean, I was going to be going to Maine to shoot a film, and I wouldn't have been able to do that had everything been up and running. They would have just found someone local.
Yeah.
But you can almost be anywhere. Obviously, it helps if you have representation, but there's ways to self-submit, and there's shows shooting in New Mexico, Oklahoma. There's the Scorsese film's going to start shooting in the spring.
Oh, really?
For like 6 months or something, right?
Yeah, they said they're going to start in February.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So winter, yeah. But yeah, and then, now Atlanta is a huge hub. I mean, it's almost everywhere. So LA is not the be all and end all. A lot of people left to go to places that have more work than we do, and especially now. But, LA is not the only place anymore.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that, Carolina. And that's why I was purposeful in having two guests who are not in Hollywood, but are also part of the entertainment industry. Because the way things are going, and let's face it, whether we like it or not, this pandemic is here to stay. And also a lot of people have left LA, even because, there's no work here or they need to go. And there is a way to stay connected and do things and still make things happen from afar. Our friend Zoom and, where we are connecting all right now. there was a question. Okay, so we go into 8:15. So there's a question that came up earlier, and as you know, here in Hollywood, there is a lot of showcases. There is a lot of different showcase shows, and I think earlier you were talking about the term pretendian, and and how on those showcases, sometimes you end up with pretendians, and that then they're found out they're not really native, and they took a spot that could have gone to somebody with the actual native experience. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So there's this phenomenon of people who have been handed down a family story that is actually a myth, of a great grandmother that's a Cherokee princess. And I feel like it's probably with some best intentions, and maybe generation to generation it got passed down as truth, and maybe it started out as a joke. I don't know. There's a million different ways that could have happened, but I've had a couple of people that I know personally that I was in comedy troupes with, that there's people that wanted to call them out and did their genealogy, and then it's a matter of, okay, well, is the genealogy correct? Was there an extramarital affair? Maybe they are native, and then there's a lot of people who don't want to do their DNA, and that shouldn't be a marker of it. It's so tricky, but that myth is hurting us unless there's documented proof. If there's a really good genealogy done, or if somebody wasn't connected to it. I have friends that are adopted, but they're definitely native, and they know that, or they've done their DNA. They even know what tribe they come from, but because of the family disconnect, they won't be claimed. But we still claim them, like we believe they look native. Like they look slightly, we're all a little bit mixed, but I don't know. It's tricky. It's tricky. I wish there was a way to end it, and I feel bad for people who were told that they were native growing up, and then they find out that they weren't. It's got to be jarring to lose your identity, especially if you've really been fighting for native causes. And I don't know how that there's a solution for each instance has its own circumstances, has its own history. So I don't know. Does somebody else want to jump in? Such a touchy subject.
Yeah,
I mean, we've been finding people doing this forever in all sorts of capacities. You know what I mean? Like even going to undergrad at UC Berkeley, we had a native student program that I was heavily involved in for the time that I was there. And there were people who rolled in and were like, "Hi, I'm native." And you're like, okay. and it's saying, I mean, I do caution us saying the term looks Indian, because someone might think I don't look, you know what I mean? Even though I am, but
I think you look.
I mean, but I mean, I'm very fair though, and so depending on where I'm at in the world, someone thinks I'm something, but it's never what I am. You know what I mean? So I mean, and that also comes from me being biracial. My mother was white; she was Portuguese and Italian, and I was also heavily influenced by that because I had both grandparents living not too far from me, so I was able to experience both. And so I've very much, but we've seen it everywhere. I mean, even in the activism community here in the Bay Area, we have people who show up and they have, I for a long time would take them as face value, like, okay, this is who you say you are, okay, and then find out later on, like, oh, it was some. I feel like it's nerve-wracking when people are like, oh, I have to get documentation, I've got to get a DNA test, because even the DNA tests are not really credible. There's no like pure sample, you know what I mean? So it's such a touchy subject, and like in the United States, like the only two things, dogs and native people, are measured by blood quantum. That's really like problematic, but I think we're going to find it in every space along the way. And I think I do get really excited sometimes when people are getting called out, because there's so many times that we've seen it happen in academia, we've seen it happen in politics and all over. I feel like it's an ever-present issue. And I think the more that we're able to bring our stories to the front, we can at least sort of not mute, but like really kind of drown out all that other BS.
You're talking about like politics. Yeah. It's just, one of the problems too is I understand it is so hard to break into industry, and people are like, oh, I got Cherokee princess in my bloodline, I can audition for that. And then like, if you take the role, it's crummy because there's so limited roles for actual Native Americans in the industry. Like, I think it said 0.04% of people on TV are Native American. So it's like, and we're the lowest of any like race or, you know, anything to be on television. So I feel like it's so important to have actual indigenous people in that role, because then you like, we bring something to it that is native. And then if there's something that, like, I know there's a lot of times like where I'll read something and I'll be like, okay, this isn't correct, you know, and it's like, it's not necessarily my job to do that. But then if you're not native and you don't live that native experience, then you might not know that. And then you'll continue to perpetuate that stereotype, thinking like, oh, it's just a script, you know, I'm getting my shot in Hollywood kind of thing. And you're like, yeah, but you're hurting an entire community by perpetuating this.
Yeah.
Right. And if I can jump in on this.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
So I've always taken people's identity at face value too. Like, whatever they say they are, I mean, who am I? I didn't follow them around their whole life, so I don't know where they come from. And I definitely wasn't there when their ancestors were alive. So I've always just kind of stayed out of it as their business. But what perplexes me now is that we seem to live in a culture where you can take on a native identity, and even if you just found out, if what I like to call in private, but now public, so I'm about to say it, brand new Indians, or, you know, like brand new natives, because it's just something that's brand new and they found out or whatever. And I can't take that experience from them because I don't know. But where I feel like it's problematic is that there are voices in Indian country that then get erased with every single person that is a brand new native or a native that has no documentation, or we just have to believe you that you're native. And I'm also not into checking people's records. I'm not like, you know, a genealogist. I'm not qualified for this discussion really, other than the fact that I want to see my people portrayed. And every time a brand new native or someone who's not maybe really native takes that role, like you guys said, they're taking it away from someone who did live that life, who is living that life, who has no choice but to live that life. And then I get a little salty, just a smidge, with white passing natives, because I am too. Like, just, I mean, it's summertime, so I'm brown, but in the wintertime, I'm easily white passing. And I feel like I've always said, if you have a whole native panel and I'm the brownest person on that panel, we have problems. And I only say that because we're a very diverse group. Mm-hmm. We have Black natives, we have Islander natives, we have everything in between, and we have really, really, really pale skin natives, you know. And so there isn't a look, for sure. There's not a look, but I do think that I see a trend of the light skin and the brand new natives taking, just becoming the representation. And I feel like that has to diversify, because I know it's diverse. It's in real life. You're going to get the spectrum. We are mixed with everybody in the world, really. And that's why we survived, and how beautiful is that we're so diverse. And so I just like to see more of that. And I don't want those voices, those really rural and res voices, to ever be erased, because these are our community members that are most marginalized.
Yes. And, you know, again, you know, one of the things that I want to highlight, you know, again, reiterate the importance of the diversity within the Native community. There's not just one single monolith. That is it. There is so much more to this. There's so much more to this story. And like I said, I'm like, trust me, like I could spend hours and hours talking about this, but I do want to, you know, there is the other thing with the indigenous identities, particularly here in the United States, where the government actually has taken away some, and, you know, there's some native tribes that are no longer recognized. So there is that whole other question. There is a really good question here, and it's like, how do you combat indigenous self-hate? My grandmother refused to acknowledge our heritage after we left Oklahoma. My family has spent years reestablishing ourselves pride of who we are. How do we combat that? Because we know that that is real. Like, I think we have a strong group of women here that we know we are proud in about our heritage, but there are so many that are not. So,
Yeah.
any words of wisdom, to combat that?
Well, I'm also a part, I'm Latina as
Yes.
well. And in our community, we're called Indios, and we're the lowest class. And it's definitely taken some time to rebuild the respect, the self, not for myself. I've always been really proud of it, but for my family to really embrace it and be proud of it. They've kind of swept it under the rug a little bit. My father has actually come around. He's more and more proud of it, the more he sees how proud we are. And I bring him to Native events with Native voices, or theater readings or performances. I can't wait to bring him to powwow. I think he would love that. But we have reconnected even in Peru. We've gone to E&T Raimi, and he'll remember things and pick them up. But yeah, a lot of these families, I mean, it was basically beat out of them, and they were shamed for celebrating it. So they learned not to, and to be, to deny it. And that's a real shame. So that's a tough one, because that you can almost consider that the brand new Native, where they reconnect with it, but it was always there. So I don't want them to deny that experience either, but that's exactly why we should be writing about it. Because there's a res Native, but there's also the disconnected, displaced Native who's now reconnecting, and then connected to white supremacy and why that needs to be done away with.
Yes.
So I think it's all valid. It's kind of sad, but we can tell it in comedy form.
Yes. And this is, again, where the point where representation matters. And like I said, there is enough space for both. And the thing is, when we had these diversity showcases, or this one thing, or they have the diversity quote, and they have the one Native writer or the one Native performer, and that is it. So it is whoever is shaping the narrative in entertainment, it's kind of is shaping culture. And this is where we need more voices. And I think that you hit it right there. It's like when you see yourself represented, it's like, oh, that's somebody that looks like me. And there is another really good question here. That's from Mirage, our lovely host. She's actually from Alaska. And so she was born in Alaska. So I went to school with a lot of Natives. Many things were hurtful to me as a child. You want to ask the question, Mirage, yourself?
No, I'm good. I'm good. You're doing fantastic.
So many things were hurtful to me as a child. What type of specific hurts do you associate with your childhood, if any, especially growing Native? Any particular hurts that you remember?
I do remember being a kid one time, and they were teasing me because I was brown, and just saying that I wasn't brown because of my skin color. I was brown because I was dirty. So yeah, like I remember stuff like that, where it's just like people would put me down because of, like you said, like the skin color, like, oh, you're dirty, why don't you take a bath? And you're like,
I had that in Alaska. I had that too. I had that, like, wash off the brown. Can you wash the brown off?
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Well,
Let's find those kids. We got to find them.
I was in the pool, so I'd already been in the water, but I'm Afro-Latina, Indigenous Latina. So I actually was black, but they would just be like, so you're black, right? And I was like, no, am I?
Yeah, I remember a kid was like, he's like, are you white or are you black? I'm like, I'm Native. They're like, no, you black. I'm like, okay. And I was so young, I didn't know. I was just like, okay.
And also they called me Pocahontas.
I've never heard that. That's
we gotta find them.
We gotta find that.
Do you have any pictures or anything like that? Just memories? Can you draw? This is sketch artist, somebody. We have to find them.
Yes, Jackie. You were gonna say
I'm very fortunate to have been born and raised in the Bay Area. It's pretty like the school I went to was super diverse, and it was everybody. I mostly grew up around a lot of Latinos, a lot of Mexican first generation folks, but I kind of blended in, but for sure I got made fun of for being white passing by a lot of brown kids. So it's the opposite. They were like, "Oh, you Indian? Sure. I don't wear. I can't." So, and then there wasn't any other reference. There were probably in Hayward, I want to say there were like 3 or 4 families that I knew of that were Native. We'd see each other at the powwow at Stanford Powwow, but I wouldn't they weren't like close family friends of ours, so I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to be around them. But we all knew who each other were, but our social circles just didn't end up sort of blending. But I think in my world in particular, there was just always a lot of questioning about what is this? What are we working with here? I don't know, and wanting to make me legible. So just assuming off the bat, well, you're hanging out with Mexicans, you must be a Mexican, like that was such a narrative that was always placed on me. And I think now in my adulthood, I'm like, look, I am who I am and y'all need to get with it. And I'm not going to sit here and explain things. But I think, that's just my experience being raised here in the Bay Area, though. I'm sure it would have been different if I was raised somewhere else.
Yes.
Yeah,
go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I grew up playing basketball. That was my first goal, was to be in the WNBA. So in the summertime, I would play AAU basketball on these Native American teams, and my mom would carry my CDIB certification of Indian blood card with us, because the other team, and I was like so much taller than everyone. So they were like trying to find a way to get me out. And they're like, that white girl shouldn't be playing on this Native team. And mom would be like, bam.
Wow.
So it was like, it was just, we were just kind of used to having to justify that, especially when things got competitive. I thought it was funny. It didn't, and I never felt like, I don't think I took that in a negative way. I was just like, ha, I fooled you. I snuck in.
Yeah, great. Yes.
I think I have this joke that I do on stage about where I didn't know that I was white until I was an adult and I moved away from home. Like my family didn't tell me. We never had a talk. There was no moment where they came out or anything like that. Well, my mom is the one who's white. And so like people, when I got older, and I started understanding race a little better, and keep in mind, my mom was the one who just was the odd person out. She was the only white person in my family. So when people would say, "Are you white?" I'd be like, "Yeah, she is." Like, I was like, "She's white," but I wasn't really cognizant to what I actually looked like. I just knew that I didn't look like her. And then there was a beautiful range of brown in my family that it wasn't an issue at all. I have cousins that are my same skin tone, but they're quote full blood, which I hate that term, but there's that. And then all the way, just every beautiful shade you can think of. And so it was never an issue for me. Where I really got bullied was when I lived in a town, and I was Kiowa, and my family was one of the only Kiowa families, and it was a town in Comanche country, and it was just a good old fashioned tribalism and ethnocentrism. And so it got pretty bad there because it was just, they were mean, they were rough, because I wasn't, Comanche, even though my stepdad was Comanche. And it was just one of those things where, like, at some point in your life, you get told, that you're the other. And, and you're made to feel like you're not part of that community. And that does hurt. But I think I saw somewhere in there where, the question earlier about how did you get past your Indigenous self-hate? I never experienced that at all, I think, because I had such a family that just was so beautifully them and beautifully brown and Indigenous. And the only thing, if anything, that was confusing was more like Christian versus traditionalism, and trying to figure out the colonialism versus, like, because I have this joke where I say, well, I'm not a good Kiowa because I'm not Christian enough, so when it comes to representation, I usually tell people, please don't take me as the representation, because I barely represent my family. Like, we barely, represent each other. So, yeah.
And you bring me to a really good point where it's one of the things that I wanted to show, and it is already showing. It's like how each of our experiences has shaped our worldview and has shaped who we are. And again, like I say, we cannot stand for an entire group of people, but we can stand this. I can share this is the lived experience that I have, and this is the story that I have to tell to you all. There was a question earlier that I want to make sure that I don't forget. And I'm sorry, sometimes the questions scroll really fast and I don't write them down. I'll try to get to them. But one of the questions, going back, I wanted to go back to the fellowships real quick, is if the writing fellowships have led to actually paid writing work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For Shelley, right?
Yeah, I'm working on a new Netflix series right now, and it was through that
Very cool.
community that with native story, and really excited to. And I'm getting to bring. I'm under NDA, but I get to bring in my tribe and stories from that. So yes.
All right. So
I've had a
you
bunch
heard
of inquiries, but no signed deals yet.
So far.
so far.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm in the
not yet.
process of pitching a pilot right now. Like it's at the hands of some producers who are sending it out to studios and stuff like that. And so hopefully, yeah, and it's nice because it's about a Native girl who lives in LA and spoiled and rich, and the closest family she has is on the Navajo reservation. And when her father gets thrown in jail, she has to move in with them. So it's that culture shock, which is kind of my experience. Like you were talking about how tribes are racist against other tribes that aren't their own. That was my experience. Is my mom was a teacher, she is a teacher still, but we moved to the Navajo reservation for I think 4 years when I was in middle school, and it was insane to me because I'm like, oh, I'm Native American, I'm going to like I'm going to be around natives, I'm so excited, and then they hated me because I wasn't Navajo. And for a couple years I got bullied a lot for not being, and then finally I got accepted. But so that was it's interesting, the dynamics of Native Americans.
I was just going to hop in there saying that's what non-natives don't tend to understand.
Yeah.
And what we sometimes don't tend to understand is that I'm always thinking while we're sitting here fighting each other about who's the super Indian, who's the most native, the rest of the world is thinks we went extinct. They're we're fighting. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, can we focus for 1 second about the real enemy?
Come together.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we all go off and write a pilot and it's specifically Native themed, they would be so vastly different. And that's why we have to do that in our own way.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you said that, Adrienne, about, instead of coming together, but, unfortunately, that's the legacy of the colonial mindset that's pitting us against each other. Like we get so little that we get the perception there is not enough for all of us. So I got to fight for my part. Instead of no, there is enough for all of us. And if I support you, then you support me. And one of the things that I heard that I want to draw back to the people who run the LA Skins labs and all those labs, it's they're opening doors. It's they feel like it is their responsibility to open doors and create opportunities for others. And as we're all working and creating, it's that's part of our legacy. And to show, others no, we're actually working together. It's we're from different tribes, but here we are working together and collaborating, creating opportunities for everybody.
It's something that's definitely needed, Skins Fest, because there is no way, one way into the industry. You don't go to college, graduate, and then you start working, your dream job in the industry. It's it's so much about connections and knowing, I know when I first moved to LA, I'm CAA, here's my headshot, and I had a student film on it, you know? So, and like, you know, Carolina laughs because it's like, you just don't do that, you know? They don't, they're like, I'm sorry, I represent Leonardo DiCaprio. Who are you? Kind of thing. So it's just like, there's things you don't know when you first move to the industry. And it's amazing having this resource that Ian and Patty have created, because they're getting natives into the industry. They're introducing us into like executives. And, you know, we can ask these questions because they know we're learning, like, okay, how do we talk to you? How do we pitch to you? And they're like, okay, well, these is the steps, you know? So it's amazing, because I'm really, really hoping that because we're doing these labs and we're making these scripts and we're learning things, that we can pass it on to like the next person. So when we see somebody who's like, oh, I want to be an actor, like, great, let me give you my knowledge. And it's like, it doesn't, you know, because it's not like I'm competing with you. Like, it's not like, if the job's yours, it's yours. If it's mine, it's mine. It's just, it's like, I want to teach you. I want to grow, because like we need native voices. I mean, we just need feminine female voices in the industry. And like, I want native voices too, because like you said, we're all so diverse. We have such different stories, and it's like, come on, get the frick together.
There's that makes me think about, it's about resources at the end of the day too. So like, obviously I want to participate in this LA Skins, these labs. That sounds exciting, and I know I've seen them on social media, so I'll have to figure out how to get clued into that.
Amazing.
But but I think it's resources at the end of the day. If you think about it, like, so my day job is in economic development, and the work that I do, I mean, we get to see the stark contrast. Like, Native folks, time and time again, we're on the lowest rung in terms of socioeconomic outcomes, right? So then for me, I was always told, get a job in the public sector, work for the government. That's what we do. Indians do this. You know, it's like a surefire job. It's steady. You know, I was never told follow your dreams and get creative and weird. You know what I mean? And so, because we're all trying to eat at the end of the day, we got to put food on the table. So it's about resources. And it's really like, a lot of other communities in the United States have had more opportunity than Native folks to be able to get weird and explore and go off and do stand up, you know, like what, how is that a thing? And I think at the end of the day, like, what I love to see is folks really building it for themselves. Like Adrian, like, I know that like there are not a lot of open mics, or not that there are not a lot of open mics, but I know that you didn't really do a lot of open mics. Like, you were on the road, traveling, touring, like booked gigs. Like, that's cool. That's like Native entrepreneurship, just doing that shit, running out there and doing it. People here in the Bay will be like, here's what you have to do to be a comedian. You got to do 5 mics, you got to do all these things. And so the pathways are so varied. And I think that's a big reason why there's not a lot of us out there, because telling your family member that you're going to go run off and write TV is not like the biggest, strongest, you know, like it's just, there's not a lot out there. So a lot doing it and taking those risks. So I think like at the end of the day, I just want to be able to write, be a Native person, not necessarily have to write about Native things. I could talk about a taco and how much I love carne asada and how I like the crispness on that piece of meat. You know what I'm saying? I just have to be an Indian woman saying that. You know what I'm saying? But I feel like there's a lot of pressure to like, you know, dig deep in your history and get all stoic and stuff. And I'm like, can I talk about Hello Kitty? Because I could talk about Hello Kitty. I love Hello Kitty. You guys should see this house behind me. You know what I mean? Like, there's just things that are unique about us that I want those stories to also come through, that don't necessarily sort of like, you know, have to be Indian in a certain way, I guess, if that makes sense. And that's one thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned when we were talking about all these things.
No, but you make a very great point about access. It's like, you know, Kara was saying it earlier too, the information, you just don't know that is out there. And, you know, the thing that we keep hearing is like, oh, there just aren't enough of X ethnicity. There aren't enough, you know, whether it's African-American, Latinos, or, oh, there isn't enough Native. Oh, no, there are a lot of them. Look at this panel right here. But the thing is, you always don't have the access to the information. If it were not like, look how many of you here have done, you know, the Skins Lab or have done labs like that has opened, and now you know, but there's so many more that don't. So it's that door opening. And Mirage was saying earlier, it's like, we need diversity in the executive board too, that's in the decision making where the purse strings are, so that more of our stories, like all these perspectives, like I would watch that sitcom like any day of you, the Native woman, talk about tacos and Hello Kitty.
You know, I think another thing that we're all kind of battling too, I feel like with me, it's just just trying to prove to everybody constantly that we actually didn't go exist or extinct. Like we still exist. We're still just trying to prove that we exist. And then it's various levels of trying to prove we exist. It's like, okay, here's my card. Here's my, like, we have all these like authenticators, which are important because we mentioned the pretendians, you know, they are important, but we're busy doing that and trying to tell the rest of the world that we're here, that we can't, you know, my dream is just to see like a sitcom of like every type of Native, but they don't talk about being Native, and it's not sad, and they're happy. It's just like, I want to see a blonde hair, blue-eyed, you know, bombshell, and I want to see everything in between, and there's no discussion of like, oh, well, you know, they just don't talk about it. They're just existing. And every other group of people get to just exist. They get to just be human beings. And we're the only ones that have to be super human beings. And so, yeah, that's my big dream. I just want to see like exactly what you're talking about, you know, Hello Kitty Taco, all of that. We should name the show Hello Kitty Taco.
Hello Kitty Taco. And then it's like,
Taco.
Yes. You know, somebody posted earlier that Warner Bros. Is seriously looking for sitcom writers. Hello, look at here, and we have the pitch already for the sitcom, okay? And we have the talent.
It's funny you talk about like people not knowing that we exist. I remember being in high school and telling one of my classmates, oh yeah, I'm Native American. And he was like, really? He's like, I thought you guys went extinct when the Pilgrims came over.
Oh my God.
No, that's just kind of where history ended for us.
Yeah.
And then we're done.
Do you know his name? Do you remember his name? Just
Put him on blast.
idea.
No, I mean, like, it's like part of me is like, I can't get too mad at him because that's the history we're taught. It's like, if he's not exposed to it, it's not on the media. We're not, you know, on shows. We're not in executive positions. So it's like, can I really get mad at him that he doesn't know we exist? You know, I mean, it's terrible, but it's one of those things where it's like, that's what we're trying to fight against, is like, be like Shelley said earlier, being the token Native, you know, and it's a fight.
Yeah, it is definitely a fight. And, you know, Mirage was on, especially as women, even more so. It's,
oh my God.
Yeah, the sexism, everything. But, you know, we're getting to, so Mirage, I think that we have like 3 minutes left. I think we're supposed to wrap at 8:15. So as we're getting towards the end, you know, I think I want to give you, and before we do that, Shelley, did you want to add something? Because at some point you looked like you wanted to say something.
Oh, I kept laughing at Mirage's head just appearing and saying and then disappearing. It was this little genie that just had like one nugget of wisdom.
That's how I do. It's just I have very little to add, but when I
Yes. You know, we know it's the Mirage hit list. You know, if anyone has, you know, done any harm, it goes into Mirage hit list.
Very true. Very.
We'll provide that list by midnight.
So, as we're starting to get to winding down, you know, the closing thoughts, I'd like to give each of, Mirage is saying no rush. Okay, great. I'm just like, you know, I'm trying to keep time, but, you know, still want to get things to a natural conclusion. But, you know, one thing that I did want to share a little bit about me, you know, I'm from Honduras, born and raised, and I have to say, colonial Spaniards were very efficient in erasing the Native identity. So it's to the point that, you know, I know my family, especially my dad, grew up with the point being called Indio, but not knowing what tribe and what. And so it's been part of my quest. And, you know, and I appreciate Adrian's point in me, like, reconnecting with that heritage. But it's also, I think, a point of in the come from. It's like, it's the come from truly, and are you claiming it to truly connect and honor it? Or are you claiming it just because, oh, they need Native, so if I say I'm Native, I get the spot. So that is, so it is a true, you know, issue. Like, it's a hard balance, you know, in terms of the blood, you know, how much what is an authentic experience. But I think we know it, especially if we look at this panel, it's like, you feel it like, no, that's authentic. No, you're trying to pass. That's not. And since we have a little bit more time, I did want to say, one of you opened for Michelle Obama. So if that one wants to talk a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, okay. So 2008, I
Aw.
believe. Yeah. And it was it was the campaign, and they were coming to Colorado. Michelle Obama was coming to Colorado, not Barack, but I was like, for all intents and purposes, I was like, that's the president.
Yep.
I was so excited. Anyway, but I was volunteering for her campaign anyway. And so I think that's how they found me. They wanted to have someone give an invocation. And I do quotes because I still don't really know what that is. I was like, yeah, I'll go up there and talk. And so, then I felt like almost like I cheated them, like they wanted a prayer and some very wise words. I don't know, but they did say that if you want to, you can dress in your native regalia. And then I was like, I will, because it's Michelle Obama. And, so anyway, I did a joke on stage, which I don't do anymore because I've moved away from the word half-breed, because I realized that it's offensive. Someone had to tell me that. Another half-breed had to tell me that. And then I was like, oh. And so anyway, I moved away from that. But what I would say is they wanted a token Indian. And I said, I'll give you a token half-breed, which is stupid because that doesn't exist. And but it was a really good experience. She was so, oh my gosh, I do this bit on stage because literally she just took my breath away. I was mesmerized. And here's the other thing. I act so stupid in front of people I really admire. So if like we meet face to face and I'm just a little off, it's because I really like you. I just like can't get it together. So but anyway, and what really, really just, because I was going to ask her questions and really like, because I'm really about holding people accountable, even if I really like you, or myself, like hold me accountable. So I just wanted to, definitely be like, hey, have you forgot about Native people? Can you try not to, And I didn't even say nothing to her. She just like walked in the room, and I swear she was just like drop dead gorgeous and like freaking aura around her. And she had this effect on me. So then I do in my bit, I'm so much smaller than her because I wore moccasins, and it is scientifically proven that if you put on moccasins, you go 1 inch into the earth. This is a fact. And so I was so much shorter. She was wearing heels. It was just like I felt like her daughter all of a sudden. And she hugged me, and I melted, like literally all the stuff I had planned for her, what I wanted to talk to her about. Because this was a one-on-one we got to have. That was part of the deal, was that I got to meet her one-on-one. And anyway, I couldn't say anything to her. I'm not proud of my words. I'm not proud of what I said, but this is what I said to her. I was like, you're so pretty. And I was like, because I like to think of myself as a really like progressive woman, and I don't care about looks and stuff like that. But it was awful. It was not a proud moment. It was one of those moments that looked good on paper. It looks perfect on paper, but in real life, it was not a proud moment for me because I was so like, oh my, I was floating. I couldn't talk right. But my actual speech that I gave, I think I gave the speech first, or I met her. I don't remember, but the actual speech that I gave was just like, I don't know. I don't even remember it, but it wasn't like very spiritual or anything like that. It was just like, we should vote or something. didn't have that moment, but thanks. Yeah, I've done a lot of questionable things in my career. I was also on Bridezillas. We'll talk about that. That's the second panel.
Yeah,
that's the second panel.
It's
But
okay.
we
I feel
should
like
vote.
voting is very spiritual this year. Exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
And that's a side note. We should people need to stop asking Native people to pray. You know what I mean? Like, we got to stop. I'd be like, there's elders here. Like, you need to not be asking me to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's also tokenizing, and it happens all the time at community events. And oh, hey, you're Native. Can you say a few words? You know? It's like, what? What are you talking about? I don't know. That's my pet peeve when I'm going to an event and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, there's an Indian here. Here, come on down. We want to hear from you." Oh, this is when you want to hear from us. You never want to hear from us any other time, but now all of a sudden you're going to pause for a moment and listen in. You know, I'm like, bye.
I hate when people always ask me, how Native are you? Or like, I had this random lady, I was standing in a line and she's like, "Oh, are you a mixed Native?" And I had I played dumb and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm Kiowa in Wichita." And then I turned around because I knew what she meant. And then she was just like, "Oh." And I'm like, "No, you can't just why do you feel that's polite to ask somebody "Oh, what are you? Are you?"
You don't know her name, right? You don't.
No.
I don't. There's just a random lady standing behind me in the fry bread line, and I'm like, "Woman, I am hungry. Don't now."
Yeah.
I hate that question. How Native are you? What?
Well, now I've started asking people, how European are you?
Yeah.
And I call them European Americans now.
European.
Yeah.
And some of them don't know. They just say a bunch of white, and I'm like, that's sad.
People don't know. There's people who do not know. They go,
Yeah.
I randomly asked a person like, "Oh, what's your last name?" And then, what is the origin of your last name? And then they shouted to their husband and were like, what is this? And this person, they had been married for a while. And I was like, whoa, how do you not know that? Anyway.
I love it.
On a side note, you can't say that Native women aren't funny after watching this because I've personally laughed.
I almost need a tissue.
On a good Saturday night. I was dying.
And we're on our best behavior right now, so
right.
Right.
I'm trying to look put together.
Get a couple margaritas in me. No.
Yeah. There are people watching. It's okay. Best behavior. Best look.
I'm PC right now.
Yeah. Yet, we're trying to put on our best stoic look.
That should be the screenshot right there.
Yeah.
But now I look like I just want to fight.
I know, right?
You're squaring up.
Don't you hate that when your sexy face is the same as your fight face?
Yeah.
I'm very versatile.
That's so funny.
Jackie, I also want you to talk a little bit about the show that you did that I'm forgetting the name right now.
Oh yeah, the Good Medicine comedy show that we're talking about. Yeah. In quarantine, back at the start when everyone had energy and thought this would be over, back in May, about 10 years ago, I hosted the Good Medicine comedy show, and we raised a little over $8,000 for the National Congress of American Indians COVID-19 response fund. So the money was deployed to tribal nations throughout the United States. I wanted to make sure that it was like a national, because there's so many different COVID funds for certain tribes and stuff. But that was super fun. We had Lori Kilmartin on there. She's the lead writer for Conan. We had Rhea Butcher. They've had a TV show called Take My Wife. And then we had Judah Friedlander from 30 Rock. So it was fun to and then also Native comics too. We had Dallas Goldtooth. We had Teresa Chuiwa from the Ladies in Native Comedy. That Adrian Chalapa is you're the founder, right, of Ladies in Native Comedy? Yep. And then we also, we had Mark Yaffe. We had a bunch of folks, but it was fun to get Native folks with sort of nationally known acts and stuff. And since then, they've collaborated a bunch. I know Judah had, I forget. Judah had me on a couple of his shows, and it's been fun. So I've also a producer. Prior to the pandemic, I ran a monthly all women's show here in Oakland, and started doing some Indian comedy hour shows at the start of the pandemic, which I should probably bring up again. Adrian was a guest on that show too, so it's been really fun. I will say the pandemic has been epically awful, but because it's virtual now, like Adrian and I hadn't ever been able to perform on a stage together, and so now during the pandemic we got a chance to do that. In fact, like that's back to Adrian's point on proximity. There are native comedians and there are native funny people. Obviously, we know of the 1491s, we know of the Ladies Native Comedy, we know like all these folks, but we're all in different states. We're all over the country, and so part of the project I was working on, which unfortunately got canceled, is the Native Comedy Festival that's going to take place in Oakland at some point. I have funding for it, so maybe next year. I don't know. Stay tuned for that. But it's been really fun getting to connect with other Native folks, and Joey obviously is a big connection too. So thanks, Joey, for making this happen, and for all the other connections he's been making throughout the pandemic to different Native comedians. So it's been good, and it's also great to meet all of you, because now I'm like, oh, I know showrunners. And I know actors, and I know how these, so it's good for us all to stay connected and to down the road, we'll probably be working with each other on different projects. So exciting to get connected.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted you to talk. I wanted you all to talk a little bit about what you do, because you just had a really great point that there's a very good chance that at some point we're all going to collaborate in something. And so if you want to bring the Good Medicine show again, now you know a lot more people.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna we're planning to bring Good Medicine back for another show. I mean, it was so fun because it was like a big production in quarantine, and we had like 9,000 views in just 24 hours. So it was just like good to know that we were reaching people all over. And I'm hoping to get another show back together. I'm still working my day job, which I'm like, I want to just do comedy all day. I just want to write and do comedy all day. What is this whole bills needing to be paid thing? So. But I'm grateful to have a job. That all said, I'm grateful. It's a rough time out there for a lot of folks, so appreciative of that. But yes, would love to get it going back up again.
Great. So now we are getting close to the end. We're getting close to 8:30. I could keep going with this, you guys. I mean, the thing is, I think Mirage is going to cut us off at 8:30.
I won't. I can keep going too, but
yeah, I
don't know how to edit. Past an hour and a half.
Yeah, no, I understand. So as we're getting to the end, like I said, I wanted to go back to. I'd like to give each of you, a chance to say, some parting words. What's your message, and also plug away if you're doing something. If you have a show, you have a channel on YouTube or something, plug away. This is your chance, ladies. So,
I want to tell all the natives out there to definitely sign your census.
Yes.
I'm native and I count.
Yes.
The California Native Vote Project is trying to get out the word, so it helps get us more programs that can help develop us. So definitely make sure you're counted, please.
Yes.
Already done, babe.
Score.
Yes.
I was like, I have nothing to promote. I mean, I got a shirt that says something. Where's my shirt? Where's this?
Yay, girl power!
But no, I have nothing to promote. I love like working with Native people. Like if anyone watching has like sells Native anything Native, like you're even working in the industry, please reach out to me on like Instagram. I love connecting with, people, and I like to, like, anytime there's an opportunity, I try my best to like post it, especially like for Native people or Native women. And just like, just people in general, actually, because I've been posting Black Lives Matter and like Latina, like anything comes up, I'm like, yes, send it, because I want more diversity in the industry and I want more voices. And because of Black Lives Matter, like people are actually like demanding authentic voices, which is amazing. So it's like, and like companies, like somebody said, Warner Brothers, they're actually looking and demanding more, and not, I was gonna say indigenous, but just biopic, content. So it's amazing. And yes, and I will help any way I can, often to my detriment. Lack of sleep.
Right. Shelly, Jackie, Adrian.
now you guys just have me thinking about tacos. I'm like, oh, I want a taco right now.
I'm going to the truck after this.
In addition to that, I'll now close with a prayer. Thank you.
Hold on, let me get my regalia on.
We change really quick. It'll only take 20 minutes. So we have 2 programs I think worth mentioning. Again, the LA Skins program for any artists out there who want educational opportunities to connect the community itself, even if you don't happen to get in right away. Get on their Facebook. They're really active. It's just such a supportive community. And then I discovered the UAII Workforce Development Program through the Showrunners Program. And I have been like taking all of these classes through them. Their big thing is trying to support natives and educate them. So, I mean, now ask me how to do PowerPoint, how to do Microsoft Word Suite. And they've got all of these. So if you're looking for, that's not something for you and you want to donate to them, because they really invest in those programs and take advantage of it if you can. That's all I got at the top of my head.
And so we are at time. Adrian, you have a website, right?
Oh, yeah. Cellopod.com and Arrest Breonna Taylor's Killers and Justice for Everybody Who's Been Killed by the Police, and donate money and eat vegetables.
Yes. Yeah.
And Jackie.
Quick plug, follow me at Jackie Comedy, JACKIE Comedy. I'm on all the Instagrams and the Twitters and stuff, so you can catch me there to see what shows I'm doing. And be well, man. Like, just right now, big old, take time for self-care. It's a rough time out there. So take time to listen to your body and do what you got to do. And sometimes that means resting and not doing stuff. And you just, be okay with that. Sometimes we got to have a timeout day just to chill. So yeah, that's my parting wisdom.
It's like you're talking directly to me.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you to my lovely panelists. Thank you to our audience and being so engaged. We got so many comments. Thank you so much. And Mirage, take it away.
Thank you, Mirage.
Wow. Thank you so much. This was informative. It was, it was heartfelt and it was hilarious. Thank you so much for all of your giving all of yourself to this moment in time. And I just hope that so many people get to experience you like I've just experienced you. This has just been amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
I have nothing else to say. I'm so inarticulate right now. I'm just like,
It's like Michelle Obama's in the room.
That blew my mind. So I'm just like, I'm completely blown away. But thanks so much. And I just hope that we do it again, because we keep running out of time with amazing women. And I'm blown away. I have nothing to say except for let's find those people. Let's find
midnight.
We have to at least have it. Thank you for everyone. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for being engaged. Thank you for coming every Saturday. Next week we'll have another group of wonderful women, and we're going to do a fake goodbye, because we're going to stay, but we're going to fake say goodbye because I don't know how to end these things. Bye, everybody.
Bye. The police.
Yes.